Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. As most people in the United States know by now, George Zimmerman was recently acquitted of murder in the trial that he underwent as a result of the shooting death of Trayvon Martin in February of 2012. In March of 2012, I made a video titled The Travesty of Trayvon Martin's Murder, in which I expressed my outrage that at that time, George Zimmerman hadn't yet even been brought to face trial. He was essentially let free by the Sanford police, and the police thought that there was absolutely no probable cause to arrest him at all. And I strongly disagreed with that. I thought that it was a travesty that an innocent young man was shot to death for essentially just walking and looking around. I thought that Zimmerman had simply killed Trayvon Martin in cold blood without any reasonable provocation, and that as a result, Zimmerman should be treated justly, but if found guilty, harshly. I said, for instance, that if Zimmerman were found guilty after a fair trial, then all options, including the death penalty, should be on the table with regard to punishment. Now that the verdict has been issued and George Zimmerman has been exonerated on all charges, what do I think about this? Few people have asked me to offer my thoughts, so I'll offer my sincere thoughts here. For me, the most important thing about this whole matter is that a fair trial did take place, that George Zimmerman was ultimately arrested and made to stand trial for the death of Trayvon Martin, that this incident wasn't just buried, and that he wasn't just allowed to walk without any sort of due process. In March of 2012, I was outraged that none of this formal process had taken place at all, and that the Sanford police were quite reluctant to undertake any formal charges against George Zimmerman. It took the intervention of much higher level authorities to get a trial to start. The trial was very important. It allowed crucial evidence to emerge, and it allowed every aspect of this case to be explored. I'm confident that the jury made a well-intentioned decision. I will even go so far as to say I don't disagree with this decision. I think it was a reasonable one. The Sanford police, however, mishandled this case early on by refusing to allow a thorough exploration of the evidence in a formal public forum. Now, why did my initial commentary on this strongly incline to think that George Zimmerman did murder Trayvon Martin in cold blood? Well, the media reports on this case did not have all the facts, and the media reports were all I had to make my commentary. I didn't have any special or privileged access to information that most people lacked. Indeed, the media often deliberately manipulated, distorted, and fabricated the information pertaining to this case, as I will later discuss. And the media did this in order to manufacture a particular reaction of widespread public outrage. I must admit that I fell victim to this manipulation, and that I needed additional facts to disabuse me of it. Gradually, as the trial went on, those additional facts did indeed emerge. That's what our justice system is supposed to achieve. So the key question in this trial, and the key question that is decisive in terms of the verdict that should have been reached, is whether any reasonable doubt exists about the motive for the killing. Did Zimmerman indeed kill Trayvon in cold blood, or could he have done it in self-defense? Naturally, self-defense is a basic right that we all have as free individuals and as citizens of nominally free, at least, countries. Unfortunately, only two people ever knew the full story, and one of them is dead. Witnesses to this incident, which had initially suggested that the killing occurred in cold blood, were less reliable than originally thought, perhaps because the prosecution did a poor job in integrating their testimony into its case. So, In the light of that, it is plausible that Zimmerman was acting in self-defense. And if this cannot be ruled out, then the court had the duty to acquit. It is far better to acquit a guilty man than to risk punishing an innocent one. And I adhere to that principle always. I adhere to that principle even if it's 10% likely that the accused person was innocent. Even if George Zimmerman did actually inappropriately murder Trayvon Martin in cold blood, there was enough doubt for that interpretation to not be the exclusive one. And now it is vital that this verdict be respected. In American law, in the U.S. Bill of Rights, the protection against double jeopardy is one of the most important. If Zimmerman was found innocent in a rigorous court of law, and the trial appeared to be fair and allowed each side to present its best case, then we as the lay public cannot do better. I am satisfied that Zimmerman was treated justly. May he live a good life and avoid any similar tragic confrontation. Perhaps he learned his lessons from what transpired on that fateful night when Trayvon Martin was killed. I had said that should Zimmerman be found guilty, the death penalty should be one of the options considered. However, because Zimmerman was acquitted, this is no longer a consideration. Clearly, if there is no guilt, there should be no punishment. Moreover, since it is possible that Zimmerman acted in self-defense, it cannot be said that Zimmerman simply killed a person he disliked in cold blood. A self-defense motive is more understandable, and Zimmerman, as an individual, does not pose a threat to the rest of us. What I was very concerned with in my initial video is that if Zimmerman were allowed to walk free, and he had indeed murdered Trayvon in cold blood, this would set a precedent that other vigilantes in our society would use to essentially go after anyone they thought looked suspicious or anyone whom they disliked because the victims were different from the people acting on their own peculiar senses of justice. However, the injuries to George Zimmerman was real, and it was really disgraceful how the ABC News photograph was redigitized, as ABC put it, to obscure those injuries. There were real severe traumas to the back of Zimmerman's head and to his nose. And if Trayvon had indeed caused those injuries, then Zimmerman would have had cause to fear for his life. Now, I don't know who initiated the first blow in that confrontation. I don't think we will ever know. Zimmerman knows, and he has, of course, told us a version that is favorable to him. It may or may not be true, but again, there's that element of doubt. Furthermore, NBC edited the transcript of Zimmerman's conversation with the police dispatcher to insinuate that Zimmerman engaged in racial profiling and used a slur. In fact, there was selective removal of aspects of that transcript. There was selected emphasis on a phrase that was, in the greatest likelihood, probably not a racial slur, but it was represented that way in the mainstream media. But with the emergence of more details, it became clear to me that Zimmerman's personality does not fit that of a racist. In fact, it does not even fit the personality of a vigilante justice warrior who sympathizes with the police in all cases. Zimmerman has himself criticized police abuses, including in early 2011 an incident where the son of a police officer beat a homeless black man. So it wasn't even that he didn't have any particular prejudice against African Americans. He specifically stood up for one, and he has helped others. And he specifically stood up for one against the police in a situation where he thought the police were engaging in favoritism. So that's not the profile of a racist to me. And as a result, I don't think that Zimmerman uttered that racial slur. And I don't think his decision to confront Trayvon Martin was motivated by any particular dislike of any group of people. That being said, the killing of Trayvon Martin was a tragedy without question. It shouldn't have happened, and it was entirely avoidable. Zimmerman, while not being guilty of murder, is, I think, guilty of severe imprudence. If he had simply adhered to the instructions of the police dispatcher not to follow Trayvon, which instructions Zimmerman explicitly acknowledged, then none of this would have happened. Trayvon would still have been alive, and I think the world would have been a better place as a result. There was justice for Zimmerman, but there will never be justice for Trayvon Martin. Irrespective of who he was as a person, or whether he too might have behaved recklessly or even with physical hostility on that day, it is clear, 100% unambiguously clear, that Trayvon did not deserve the death penalty for anything he might have done. While I no longer feel outraged about the handling of this case and the fate of Zimmerman, I can feel nothing but profound sadness for the fact that Trayvon Martin's life was cut short. Death is the greatest of all tragedies, and Trayvon did not even have the chance at a life that most of us expect as a matter of course. He was only 17 when he was killed, and we do not know what his life might have become. It's an irreplaceable loss, and unfortunately, at this point in time, there's no way to make it right. There never really was a way to make it right once his life ended. So I will leave you on that sad note, ladies and gentlemen, and on the other hand, a note of confidence that in this particular instance, the American justice system did in fact work as it was intended, even if the result was not what I had expected and not perhaps what I had advocated to begin with. Thank you very much.